Hello, everyone. Thank you for listening to the podcast. I had a super fun opportunity to share my career and entrepreneurial journey at PACE, the Pacific Asian Center for Entrepreneurship from the University of Hawaii. And I gotta say, even though we were on Zoom, I could feel the energy from this group of entrepreneurs. Enjoy.
Please join me in welcoming Deena Tearney.
Hey, thank you, Marcus. Thank you, Kurt, and everyone. And thank you for inviting me today. Super excited to have this conversation with you. So I'm here today to tell you my career story from corporate job to entrepreneur life and how I got a seat at the table every step of the way. And what I mean when I said that with our title for today was it's really how I developed as a leader. Because I'm a big believer that successful entrepreneurship requires leadership to at the nth degree. The degree of leadership required across a variety of my jobs was very tough, and it required a lot of leadership from me, but entrepreneurship is next level leadership. So I'm really also I'm on a little bit of a mission to cultivate leadership in general. So you're catching me at a time when that's really fresh on my mind. And thank you, like I said, for being here, but also thank you for being interested in entrepreneurship. Like Peter was saying, small businesses, at least to me, I think, a lot of us believe that they are the lifeblood of the US economy. And now more than ever, we do need strong small businesses to support our recovery as we look ahead into the future. So I really love being around entrepreneurs for that reason and those that are interested in starting a business. And each of you are here for a reason. You want to do something great. You really want to bring an idea to life. You want to solve a problem. And I want to help you, if I can, to make that happen. So my name is Deena Tearney. I'm the founder and CEO of Pacific Point. Pacific Point is a Salesforce consulting partner. And what that means is we help businesses and organizations implement Salesforce. And Salesforce is the world's #1 customer relationship management system. Over the next 30 minutes or so, I'll tell my career story. And then, like I said, because I'm on a mission to cultivate more leadership in general, I'm going to talk on 3 points of leadership that I just think is incredibly important for entrepreneurs. It's something you can apply now and throughout your entrepreneurial journey. So I hope that sounds like a good plan, and we'll jump right in. All right, so my story is, for me, like you guys, you're in college now, it's great. I graduated a while back with a degree from the College of Business in Information Systems. I'm originally from Texas, and that's where I graduated. I got a degree, got my degree, and quickly afterwards, I landed a job as a software engineer or programmer analyst, depending on what you guys call it. What I was doing was I was building business applications or software. So if you think about it, I was a coder, I was a developer. That's how I started my career. I did that for the first several years of my career. And in the spectrum of IT, just for a little bit of context, it's kind of like when someone says they go into healthcare. I mean, that could be any number of things. In the framework of IT, there's infrastructure, there's hardware, there's desktops, there's devices, there's networks, there's cybersecurity, and then there's applications and business software, and there's software. And even within software, there's different types of software. And I worked mostly in business applications, so things that ran different aspects of an organization. And even within that, there's different segments of software that become focal areas. So you may have heard of ERP systems for inventory management, supply chain management. You may have heard of HR solutions. I mean, there's a number of things that businesses use to run their operation. But the area that I plugged into very quickly after I graduated from college was a type of software solution called customer relationship management. And CRM, as it's also called for short, is really focused on helping businesses and organizations better understand their customers and cultivate that relationship with them so that they can better market to those customers, better sell to those customers, and better serve those customers. So if you think about it, if you're, and this is also, by the way, for B2B as well as B2C consumers, and CRM is used across both business types. So, if you think about from a marketing perspective, CRM and Salesforce solutions will help you maybe serve up different marketing content. It'll help you When you serve up information on a website, it makes it much more personalized to that particular customer's experience need. It helps you close deals faster on the sales side, help you have better context when you understand your customer. For example, if you're in a B2B scenario and you maybe look in your CRM and you see that I've called in 15 times over the last week to complain about an issue, I'm going to handle that sales situation slightly different because I have that 360-degree view of my customers. So it helps me sell better to them. And then after I've sold to them, or if I've sold them a certain type of thing, I have to serve them. And so then it's call center management, it's bot management, it's live agent and live chat. It's all those channels of how you serve your customer. And all of that information really tells an organization a lot about their customers that they can better market, sale, and serve to those customers. So that's what I've been doing over the course of my career. I started very early in it. And I was working in what we call like industry jobs. So that's when you work for an employer. And I worked in the telecom industry, I worked in retail. And I got kind of bored, I guess you could say, of that type of job. And, sometimes it's not the fault of the organization, it's just sort of the dynamic of what's happening at that time in a given company and what kind of work I had in my job. And so I felt like it was time for me, after a few years in those industry jobs as a software engineer, that I wanted to pursue a career in consulting. And what that enabled me to have was this constant flow of learning and accelerating my career, accelerating my industry knowledge, accelerating my technical knowledge, because that was really what was top of mind for me at that point in my career, was developing more technical skill. So I ended up interviewing for a job as a consultant with Capgemini and Ernst & Young. I also worked at IBM Global Services doing the same thing, all CRM related implementations for a few more years after that. And I'll never forget when I was interviewing for Capgemini in particular. It was a long day of panel interviews, like round after round after round, meeting a lot of different people. And then I landed the job and it was great. And I was living in Dallas at the time. And in the consulting space, in that job, you fly to your client site on Monday. You're staying at your client site, and then on Thursday you fly home. So you're always kind of on the go. But I kind of had this moment, like right after I accepted the job, where I went into the office, which is not super common. And so I went into the office and I ended up kind of looking for a space to sit down. And I was able to sit next to this woman who was part of my interview panel. And so we hadn't seen each other, since my interview. And she congratulated me and said, "Great, it's awesome that you got the job, it's fantastic." And she was very much more experienced in her career as a consultant, doing similar work to me. And I'll never forget it because she said, "Deena, it's great, you're gonna continue to develop your technical skills, but just make sure that you always get a seat at the table. Make sure you take that next step in your career." And at the time, I remember thinking, what does she mean? Like, what is she talking about? Like, was I giving off some kind of vibe of some sort? Like, what was she trying to get at? And she was really trying to encourage me to have a voice and really to be a leader. And great that you have some technical skills. That's amazing that you can get the job done and do what you're asked to do. But when you become a leader, when you become a problem solver, when you become the one that people are looking to for solutions, then you take that next step. Then you have a seat at the table, right? Then people view you as a leader. And really, I wanted to tell that story in part because it's the title for today's session. And also, I'm just really into this whole leadership theme as we look ahead. And it's so important for entrepreneurs as well. So anyways, I continued my career. I continued to develop my experience in CRM, my technical skill, my soft skills. I started to develop more leadership skills thanks to her, encouragement and challenge. And then I was, like I said, it's kind of a traveling job, like I mentioned, Monday through Thursday, you're on the road, you come back home Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and that routine can get a little old. I think it was a combination of things at that sort of inflection point in my life, maybe a little bit of burnout, lots of long hours, lots of traveling, like I mentioned. I even rented out my house in Dallas, so I was kind of living like a gypsy. So things were a little weird for me at that point. So I was like, I ended up getting a job in Hawaii. It was super random. I just applied for this job and got a job out here. And I saw it as a moment where maybe I'll come to Hawaii and I'll, work for a couple years and then come back. And it's sort of like, I viewed it as almost like this change up, like a refresher moment. And so I came to Hawaii, and right away I took a job working for the state and managing a large IT program. And that was not exactly CRM, but it was kind of like that. It was my first time kind of stepping away, doing something a little bit different. And right away I saw in Hawaii that there was a challenge with our tech talent pool. And I remember thinking, it'd be great if someone could solve this problem, because it's a really unique problem that we have in Hawaii. We have distance, right? We have, the cost of traveling to do what I just described that many consultants do. That flight is 5 hours. It's longer than it is. I mean, coast to coast is 6 hours, but that's a long flight. You got time zone differences that are challenging to overcome. And you have costs, related to, even if they did travel, the cost of coming to a tourist destination. There's a lot of kind of factors at play. And one of the things that struck me really early when I was trying to recruit and staff up the program and bring in the IT talent that we need to deliver, a very transformational program that was, transitioning off of old legacy systems onto new platforms and technology. I was taken really by how some people were responding to that as, well, that's Hawaii, and oh yeah, well, we can't really have that, or this is kind of the way it is here, we kind of do what we got to do. And I'm not sure that they were necessarily saying this, but I got a little bit of a vibe that, like, are we settling? Like, I don't feel like businesses and organizations in Hawaii should necessarily lower their bar or settle when it comes to having the technical talent that they need to give them the business solutions that they need to help them be more efficient, to help them go to their next level, to help them be more productive and how they execute on whatever it is that their mission is. And so I took that, like, okay, I guess that's the way that they're going to think. I didn't want to lower the bar. And so I worked with a lot of our vendors that I was working with at the time and tried to look at different ways to sort of structure IT teams to make it, work from a financial standpoint, work from, where do people need to physically be to help me effectively roll out this technology. And I remember just, kind of doing it as I needed to do it for the work that I had at hand. But I remember thinking at that time, it'd be a great, like I said, a good solution for someone to address for the unique challenges that we face in Hawaii. And I, at that moment, I wasn't really thinking like, oh, I'm gonna, be an entrepreneur and I'm gonna tackle that one. But I remember noticing it. I continued to, stay in Hawaii longer than I expected. Moved on in my career, got another job in a leadership position, and saw it again. And I was thinking, wow, it's definitely pervasive. And talking to other leaders in Hawaii, you definitely hear the same thing. You hear that same challenge. And I kind of reached a point in my career where I was like, well, I'm kind of at that point where need to go to the next level in my career, or maybe I will start a business. Maybe I will go for that and see if I can solve that problem in Hawaii. And one thing that I will say as an entrepreneur, when you're ready to make that decision, is really looking at the risk, that you're willing to bear and feeling okay with it. And I think for me, obviously I had a lot of experience already from a job in the past, a series of jobs in the past. And so my thought process was, okay, I'm going to give it a go. If the market doesn't respond and doesn't like what I have to offer, I'll adjust and I'll see how it goes for a while. And if it doesn't work out, worst case scenario, I go back and, get another job, right? Like that. I had enough background and experience where I was comfortable with that risk. And so one thing I would just say, I know a lot of people tend to ask me who are interested in entrepreneurship, is that moment of taking the leap, and how do you take the leap? And do you work 2 jobs and you do all these things? And in my case, I didn't. I just said, I'm going to take the plunge and I'm going to see how it goes. And if it doesn't work out, I'm willing to accept going back to, whatever I was doing before. So again, it's unique to each person, but that was sort of my moment. So I started the company, and we didn't start with any contracts per se. We went straight for, I took a little bit of a different approach where I wasn't known as in Hawaii for my CRM background and experience. And at the time when I was polling the market and just kind of talking to people, there weren't as many people that were familiar with and or jumping into CRM solutions. So I thought, what I'll do is I'll start the business as more of a generalist, more of a technology agnostic kind of IT consulting firm that just brings high value, that helps organizations deliver on complex IT systems. So that's what I did. I targeted all of the largest companies in Hawaii as my first target base. I pulled my old friends from the US mainland that had experience that I felt was relevant to what I was wanted to offer to Hawaii businesses. I convinced many of them to come join me and move to Hawaii, and they did, some of them did. And so they began kind of getting, I guess I would call it like staffed to projects and to clients that needed that type of expertise for their systems. So what that did for me was it enabled me to have revenue flowing into the company. And while that revenue then started to build and grow, I was working in the background on Salesforce projects, and I was starting to test the waters and start to target smaller businesses or anybody that might be interested in Salesforce. Because I will say at that time, and this isn't really that long ago when you put things in perspective, there wasn't a large embrace of cloud technology in Hawaii. And particularly with the enterprise players, maybe some small businesses were adopting Salesforce. They definitely were back then, but they were the first really to adopt Salesforce. Salesforce was always first with small business. So I remember, that kind of being what I was after was revenue was coming in from the bigger projects and just more the generalist services that we were offering. And then I was working on the small projects to sort of help kind of test the waters and test the market and see if I could bring that thing that I knew how to do and the capability and expertise that I had to Hawaii and see if Hawaii was interested in that. So that was kind of happening. And along all of this, the first 2 years were extremely difficult. I'm not gonna sugarcoat that. It was extremely difficult. A lot of, naysayers, a lot of people saying like, oh, nobody's gonna go on the cloud and this big enterprise is not going to do that, and the projects are so small, like it's not going to be a sustainable business. I mean, I cannot tell you how much negativity was coming at me in those first few years. I mean, first probably 2 years were absolutely incredibly difficult. But again, like there was a lot of persistence by me to continue to move it forward. And I had the revenue coming in, so I couldn't complain, right? I figured to keep moving it, keep trying to see if the market would bite on more Salesforce work. And slowly that Salesforce side grew and grew. And what ended up happening 5 years ago, we made the complete shift where 100% of our work is Salesforce consulting. And so it was like, obviously it started off with like 100% the other direction. And slowly it was like this transition. And all of a sudden there was that inflection point that now represents all of our business, which I'm really, really proud of because it was something that I think a lot of people didn't think could really happen in our state. And now, there's Salesforce everywhere, not-for-profits, small businesses, mid-sized organizations, big enterprises going wall to wall on Salesforce, running their marketing, their sales, their service. And I'm really excited to be able to be a part of that. And it makes me happy from that standpoint. Some other questions that I get, and by the way, I should mention, when I look at the business and where we are right now, we are headquartered here in Honolulu. We're definitely a Hawaii first company. Hawaii represents absolutely the majority of our client base. We do have clients in other places as well. We have a team in San Francisco as well as in Denver, Colorado. And we're ramping up in Colorado, which I'm excited for. And we're also ramping up in Sydney, Australia. So we've been growing out there over the last several years as well. And so the team has really grown. We're bringing talent to the islands in a different way. And now we're starting to sort of say, how can we even mingle that talent that's even here to other places? And that's a really exciting thing for me too. to see that kind of transition happening. Thinking back to the days of the brain drain, everybody talking about brain drain, which they still do, but thinking about, wow, the people that we have in Hawaii are helping our customers in other states and in other places, which is very rewarding for me to look back on. So I wanted to answer a couple common questions that I get from those in the startup space. And I want to leave some time for maybe a little bit of extra questions, because with this audience, depending on where you're at in your entrepreneurial journey, I'd love to answer something that may be valuable for you at whatever moment in time you're in. But a lot of questions I get are around how you started with the first contract. And we did not start with any I didn't sell a contract beforehand. We started with a blank slate on day one, and it just built, right? And so I think that what I did, and a lot of people sometimes are not big fans of, is pro bono work. And I think you have to be very, very smart about it. It isn't something you just go around and be like, hey, I'm gonna run some free stuff. But what I did in my case was there were 2 engagements. I only did it 2 times, and it was for a very fixed set of deliverables that we were going to produce. Actually, I did it, but it was a fixed period of time. It was a fixed set of deliverables, and it gave me qualifications. It was an investment. It wasn't shortchanging me. I didn't feel like I was undervaluing myself or my capabilities when I did that. I did it with intent as an investment to establish qualifications to help me to continue to build. And I'm really proud of the fact that actually one of those 2 companies that I did the pro bono work continues to be a customer of mine today. We've been in business for 9 years. That customer was in year 1, and they're still a client of mine. And that investment paid off, right? That was an incredible investment. So pro bono, but it's got to be done right. I've heard a lot of other stories related to that not working out so well. So definitely plan that out. But I want to pass that along as people ask me about that. The other question I get asked about is partnership. Heard earlier, Peter talking about finding other people to work with you. I think in my case, I didn't really have a partner. I can explain what happened with me. I had a partner who was a passive partner. After the first couple years, I asked him to become more officially a partner of the company. The reason was he had established with a group of people in the San Francisco Bay Area, he had built and grown a consulting firm that was very similar to mine, and grew it to the extent that they sold it off, and he was part of that group of founders. And so I felt that if he was a passive partner, he became a marketing asset for me, where it wasn't just me saying, hey, I know how to run a business and I know what I'm doing, but he added this extra level of credibility, even though he really was completely passive. And I say that from a leadership perspective. He was passive. I could call him if I ever needed anything, he would help me, but he was not active in the business. There were a couple times when he was technical, so he could roll up his sleeves and help me. So he was certainly active, like when I needed the help, but he was not an active partner. And so he was there kind of for a little period of time. And then when the business was taking off, I kind of came to him and said, hey, do you want in or do you want to step out? Because passive isn't going to work, for the remainder, as we look ahead. So he wasn't at a point, he was all the way on the East Coast, it just wasn't going to work. So, he moved on. But in short, I really didn't have a partner. Like I hear a lot of people, the co-founders and they work together and they're planning on all this stuff. That really wasn't something that I did. I'm not sure that, I think in part it's because of the type of business that I had. I think it's definitely a good thing, if you can work it out with the right type of partner that truly complements you super well. But I think looking at the distribution of what people do and what they bring, and you're always going to end up with some, you may end up with some conflict as things sort of go forward. I've interviewed other entrepreneurs who've said, that they felt that for them, it also didn't work. But there's other partners, other times when it works really, really well, when there's a nice complement. So I wanted to answer that question because I heard that come up earlier with Peter's comments. The other question I get asked was, did we have any VC funding? How did we raise capital and all this? What was our seed money like? I think, first of all, we were self-funded. There was no VC. There is no VC still to this day. So I think that in part, it's a little bit the type of business that we run. In part, it was the risk that I wanted to bear. In part, it was just the organic nature of how I wanted the company to grow. And those are decisions that every entrepreneur has to make for what's right for them. I didn't run a business where all of a sudden I need to buy a fleet of cars or trucks, right? I didn't have a big, heavy lift that I needed to do straight away. So for me, it wasn't really right. For me, it was mostly payroll. It was the biggest expense, and it continues to be. But payroll is the big thing, right? So you have this point where you have to pay people, but you don't have the money yet coming in from your clients, right? So kind of figuring that out. So if you have a big push of payroll, you hire a bunch of people, then you got to figure something out. But that was our situation, not VC funded in our case. The other question that I get asked sometimes is how I made the decision and or how we grew internationally. And I will say that it's important to have a lot of foresight as you continue to look at where you want your business to grow. I can tell you as far back as probably 6 years, I knew that Hawaii was only as big as it was. Even really, actually, I should say from the beginning. When I started the business, I was like, well, if I grow it, like, where does it go, right? I mean, Hawaii is what it is. It's as large as it is. Is that what I want it to be, or do I want it to be something in addition to that? And I knew that going into this situation. So I guess it was 5 years ago when I started to evaluate other markets to enter, even though I wasn't quite ready to enter those markets. So even 5 years ago, I may not have been ready to take the plunge per se, but I knew and I had some foresight to think about that. So I started to look at other places, US mainland. I started to look at foreign countries. I visited many of them, almost landed on starting in New Zealand, but we landed in Australia, and I think that was right for us. The turning point was, there's a lot of research that goes into it, spending time there, really understanding the market, understanding what the talent pool is like. There's a lot of things to look at. I went to the Salesforce partner conference, is called the Partner Forum, a few years ago. That was probably the turning point. I was like, okay, I think this is this region, the ANZ region was right for us. And so then it started to kind of hone in from that point. But it's definitely a lot of work to learn about another country, to get set up in another country. But it's also quite exciting, and it's a great way to diversify the business as well. So I'll stop there as far as like my career journey goes and the story of that goes. And I'd like to transition for a few more minutes before I turn it back over to Kurt about that leadership point that I really, really want to hone in on today. Because I think leadership across not just my career, if that's what you decide to do with yourself, if you want to have a career job, which by the way is amazing. I had a wonderful time in a corporate job. Or if you want to pursue entrepreneurship, which I think many of you do, which I think is amazing, leadership is absolutely critical. And what I mean by leadership, and this is why I want to explain this, is first, it's really three things. First of all, it's being a problem solver. And when you think about someone coming to the table and just bringing you a problem, it's like, okay, great, now I gotta solve. Like, you don't want to be someone that's just always bringing problems to the table. You want to be a problem solver. You want to bring solutions. I remember actually probably my first or second job, there was this guy that would say, okay, what do you need? You're either creating problems or you're creating solutions. At the time I was, it was kind of a tech term or tech context, but he's right. Like, whatever you're doing, are you creating a problem or are you creating a solution? And so number one, leadership is always problem solving. It's all about figuring out how to move past that hurdle, how to solve the next challenge, right? It's not just the big problem, like in my case, oh, I want to find a way to bring top tech talent to Hawaii and provide Salesforce CRM consulting to our state and elevate, all these things and elevate businesses. That's the big problem, but there's micro problems all along the way, right? So you've got to find, how can you be a problem solver, bringing solutions. Number two, you have to learn how to win people over. It's obvious, again, when you're in the sales thing, I'm trying to, sell to a client, of course, yes, you have to know how to do sales, but it's also winning people over is motivating, it's inspiring people, it's gaining buy-in on an idea. It could be on anything that you're doing throughout the course of a job and or entrepreneurship. And so winning people over and learning that and fine-tuning that and adjusting it, because not everybody's the same. So really learning how to win people over is absolutely essential to your success as an entrepreneur. The third thing that everyone's always familiar with is execute, right? That's the hustle, that's the do, that's the put in the work, that's the never give up, right? All those things, the adjust, the pivot, and all the doing. That's 100% true. If you don't know how to do something, learn it, right? That's the execute and the hustle. And that's the third thing that absolutely is essential. But I think it's important to think about all of those three things: having solutions, being a problem solver, winning people over, knowing how to do that, and executing. Because I can tell you right now, if you were to say, Deena, what's a day in a life like for you as an entrepreneur right now? I will tell you 1,000,000 times a day, I'm problem solving. 1,000,000 times a day, I'm trying to win someone over. I'm trying to motivate. I'm trying to inspire. I'm trying to sell. 1,000,000 times a day, I'm hustling. I'm not giving up. I'm pivoting. I'm changing. I'm learning something. So I really would encourage all of you, regardless of what your entrepreneurial journey is, to pick up those skill sets, because you're going to be on your way to success. So successful entrepreneurship requires leadership to the nth degree. All right, back to you, Kirk.
Thank you so much, Deena. Wow, that was a really robust presentation, and we're super all fortunate to have you here today. So before we dive into our Q&A portion of the event, we're going to go ahead and announce our giveaway winner. Thank you so much, everybody, who entered. We had a lot of interesting submissions, and for those who didn't enter, the giveaway was based on submitting on our Instagram your favorite tech myth or tech stereotype, and our winner for our giveaway is the user Tater Tots. So congratulations. His entry was his favorite tech, I would say, myth or stereotype was founders have to raise venture capital to be successful. And I believe Deena might be able to give a reason why she picked that entry.
Yeah, for sure. I would resoundingly agree to that. That we certainly don't have any VC, and I feel like we're successful and we're on our way to success. I'm not saying I'm against it. There's a time for it. So, but you don't have to. You absolutely don't have to. So great job, Tater Tots, on that one.
So we also have Tate. I believe we have Tate, who has joined us. So Tate has won a 1-hour coffee session with Deena and a copy of the book Trailblazer by Mark Benioff, who is the CEO of Salesforce. So congratulations, Tate. We're going to go ahead and start if everybody. So we're going to take a screenshot. So Marcus and I myself are going to go dark. We're going to take a screenshot of both Tate, who's joined us today, and Deena. So Crystal, if you could go ahead and spotlight both of them. Perfect. Okay, awesome. I'm going to take a screenshot of 3. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Okay, thank you, Tate. Congratulations. Okay, so now we're going to open the floor to our Q&A session. So for those who have joined us, please enter your questions into the chat feature in Zoom, and me and Marcus will relay your questions over to Deena.
If I could just interject in the meantime while people are thinking of questions. Deena, I really admire what you've done with the company, and particularly, doing it without outside venture capital. I often do workshops on raising money, and I usually start with something like "Don't do it," why do you want to have a boss and get fired just because you sold a piece of your company? But so congratulations on that. But it seems to me that the I guess the countervailing force is, if you're not going to go out and raise capital, is you have to be very astute at picking partners, picking employees, picking your team, basically. And it sounds like you've done that. Maybe you could comment a little bit about, I know you spoke to it a bit in your talk, but maybe you could go a little deeper on that subject of, who you partner with.
For sure. On the finances side of the house, I mean, from a partnership perspective, like I mentioned, I didn't have a partner in the beginning. So all the, like I said, I had a career before, so it wasn't like I had no money. I had saved some money. So that's definitely number one. You should save some money if you can, because it helps, right? It gives you the freedom to do certain things and try certain things. And so, I think from a financial perspective, if you can bootstrap your way, I didn't pay myself. It wasn't like I paid myself in those early days. So if you can bootstrap yourself, you can get smart about where you spend your money. Don't get fancy, right? I mean, there's no reason to get fancy in the early days. Like, okay, I need a computer and I need internet. Like, what is it that I actually need to get it done? I didn't have an office for the longest time. I mean, only recently, in the last few years, did we actually get an office. But I think back to your point, some of the first employees of the company were not actual employees. They were 1099 contractors. It gave me a little bit of control. I had agreements in place that made sure that I, was controlling my costs. And so again, I think, a lot of entrepreneurship comes down to risk calculation and management of that risk. You don't want to get yourself into the situation where all of a sudden you're just, spending a lot of money when you're not sure. So, test out somebody, try them out for a little while, pay them if that makes it better, right? Or agree like what you're going to get out of it over that time frame. Because it's easy to fall into a situation where you disappoint someone, you let them down, they thought they were going to have partnership with you, or they thought blah, blah, blah was going to happen. So being clear about that as best as you can. I'm not saying I was perfect with it, but certainly that's how we funded the company, was, controlling that. And starting small, like, again, I didn't want to, maybe it would have been awesome to sell like a huge contract at the beginning, and then I would have had to go raise the money or go get a loan or something like that. But it was an organic growth. So it's like the revenue was in and I could manage that cost and then mitigate risk as I went. I don't know if that completely answers your question, but.
No, that does. That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for giving me that context.
All right,
go ahead, Marcus.
Yeah, we have a question from Nate. He says, say a business is going through a major shift that will impact everyone, and there was no other shift like this before. How do you address it with the team? How do you maintain a buy-in if leadership believes the move could be unpopular but necessary?
It's unpopular but necessary?
Yeah.
I mean, I think you have to think about it from their perspective. If you feel like they're going to be afraid of their jobs, or they're going to be afraid of what's next, establish security, right? Figure out, how can I establish security for them? Find out what the problem is or what you think the issue is. If you, like I said, if you think that there's fear, how do you establish security in the moment of that change? And thinking about what's in it for them too, right? Like we do IT transformations, and everybody, change management is like the number one thing. Announcing something that's going to change, announcing some disappointing thing that might sound disappointing, but it's really good for you. So talking about the what's in it for them and why it's important for the business is really important. And I think that's the main thing, is really trying to explain where you're headed and why this is a step to get you there.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your question, Nate. Our next question is from Tony. You talked about having a passive partner, but how did you build out your team, and how many hires were your first few employees?
Yeah, I mean, it was, like I said, the first year or so was probably mostly contractors. And then once I had more reliability, then I had the employees come on. So it is trickier because it's limiting in the sense that going the 1099 contractor route with certain people, you limit your options of the kind of person that you can like that will want to work with you, because some people don't want a 1099 contract and you're like, great, this person's so awesome, I want them to join my team, but they want to be full-time employed and I'm not ready for that risk. So if you can figure something out with that person, great, but many times you can't, especially in my field. Like IT people, they demand a certain salary, they demand a certain expectation of benefits and all these other things. And sometimes I couldn't meet those expectations very early in the company. And so I had to find, somebody that was willing to do that at a different price point. Maybe it cost me more at the 1099 rate. But the passive partner was, again, it was purely a marketing action by me. It wasn't someone that was involved in the business, right? I mean, like I would ping that person, be like, hey, what do you think about blah, blah, blah? Like it was much more like high level advisory. And it was more like putting him on the website to make him more up to establish my credibility as a company. So the early people and finding the right ones, I'll tell you, I think the first, maybe the second guy that came to my company was someone that I met, believe it or not, in my first job. So remember when I was telling you that I was a software engineer doing CRM? I met that guy and he was living in Chicago. And he moved out here. He was with my company for a super long time. The only reason he left was because he moved to LA like 2 years ago. But he'd been with my company the whole time. And so I think forging relationships with people that you know and trust and saying, hey, I have an opportunity. You want to try it? Like, here's what's in it for you, and seeing if it works. But I absolutely tapped into my network.
Awesome. Thank you, Tony. So we have another question from the chat. You mentioned in your presentation that you had to move a client from pro bono to paid. What is that process like? And I guess for those who might find themselves in similar situations in the future, how would you recommend going over that hurdle from doing stuff for free and then convincing them to start paying for your service?
Well, it wasn't an issue at all, because when I offered it, it was already defined. Basically what I'm saying is I came in and said, hey, I contacted a select person who I knew and trusted. And I said, hey, I started this business. This is my thing. Whatever, let's talk about it. But I said, I told him I'm offering a complimentary assessment. It was a technical IT assessment. If there's an area of your business applications that you want me to look at, I'm just doing it to gain some experience. I mean, I was very transparent about what it was, right? It was like, this is what it is. We're doing a technology assessment of your applications. We'll give you a readout. We'll do an assessment and a readout, and that's it. And it was very clear. So when it was done, I wasn't really pitching a lot more work. I had no expectations that he was going to hire me or anything like that. But I made it very clear what it was that I was offering. And so there was no confusion. And then they were like, oh, this is great. Like, we want to go on to blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, cool. Then we started scoping out the work. And so it was never really a difficult conversation, because I set the stage at the beginning.
All right, we have a question from Jonah. It says, in terms of winning people over, how do you adapt to different personalities when doing business? Also, how do you handle clients or those that do not stay in touch when you need them to respond to your concerns/needs?
So the first part was what again? I mean, I should look at it myself. It's probably sitting here. Right?
In terms of winning people over, how do you adapt to different personalities when doing business?
Yeah. I mean, it's a good question, and it's definitely, it's not easy. I think it comes with practice and trying to my biggest thing is trying to put yourself in the shoes of that other person and trying to understand where they may be coming from. I've developed soft skills probably because I am a consultant. I have to deal with a lot of people and a lot of different styles. And so I think that certainly helped me. But even with my own staff now, there's a lot of different personalities, there's a lot of different objectives and opinions, and trying to think about what's in it for them has really helped me adapt what I say and what I approach them with in terms of how I communicate. As far as responding to customers that don't, I mean, if if I'm in the middle of an engagement and I need people, when we're in the middle of a project, our clients will respond to us. If they don't, it's obviously going to impact their project. If you're talking about sales and winning them over, which I think is what the question was, I think the thing is, if you I have this philosophy, right? You cannot sell to someone who doesn't want to be sold to. You can't sell to someone who doesn't want what you have. So don't get caught in this trap of spending time on something when someone's not ready for what you have to offer. If they're ready, they'll come back, and stay in touch. Like, absolutely, like, create awareness and do all the marketing stuff that you need to do. But if someone's not going to respond to you and you're trying to sell something to them, I mean, go to somebody who wants to buy something for you. Your time's better spent.
Thank you, Jonah. Our next question comes from Crystal. What do you think is the most critical thing Hawaii needs to do to reverse brain drain?
Gosh, that's a good one. I think that it's these jobs. I mean, honestly, I think it's a lot of things. I think it's cultivating leadership here. I mean, even with the clients that we have, I would love to see them embracing more technology, going out on a limb, taking chances, and, finding solutions to the problems that they have. What I see with several, many customers is sometimes it's like, oh, that's too difficult to deal with. I'll just kind of keep doing what I'm doing. And I think that systemically causes the job the job level of complexity, or the level of technology, the level of innovation, all the stuff that comes with that, it stagnates. And then that's when people have to move to go get another job, because the only job that is here is the one that's the same one from 5 years ago, from 6 years ago, from 10 years ago. And I think until businesses really start to say, look, we've got to innovate, and that means I'm going to have to problem solve, I'm going to have to make some changes that are going to be difficult to deal with, but I'm going to do that. I think it's going to be tough to really impact that change. And that's what I really want to do with our company, is like, we can bring that to and set the example, right? Like, hey, we're bringing on, actually every year we brought on students, even this year, which I didn't even plan on it. I brought on a student from UH who just graduated in May. I didn't plan on doing it this year because of the pandemic, but he was a very ambitious person and showed, I mean, it was amazing. So I was like, great, let's do it. So if I can set that kind of example, hopefully others will follow suit. But people want opportunity, right? That's the world that we live in. They want opportunity. They want challenges. They want to learn. They want to do stuff. And until the employers start to step up and say, I'm going to create some opportunity, it's tough. Like, you want to leave, right? You want to go get a job where you're going to learn and do interesting and challenging things. So I'm hopeful that we can establish more leadership here to innovate.
All right, our next question is from Tate. He says, thank you so much for sharing your story, Deena. As you said that you need to know where you're going in order to grow correctly. Where do you see Pacific Point growing in the next few years? Any specific geographies you're excited about?
I'm so glad you asked that question. Yeah, we are growing rapidly. Like you mentioned in the intro, and thank you for that. The Inc. 5000, we're named one of the fastest growing companies in the U.S., private companies in the U.S., which is such an honor and a recognition of, I think, the work that just everyone has put forward. So we are positioning ourselves as kind of the Asia Pacific area. So Denver is about as far as our team will go on the US mainland, because the time zones start to get a little bit tricky. And then all the way through to Australia and New Zealand. We also opened up an office in Singapore. I'm very, very interested in the whole APAC region, Asiana region. I think Hawaii is so well positioned for that. And I think if we can get really creative about leveraging the geography of Hawaii, which is what we're doing, I think it's exciting stuff in store, not just for our company, but hopefully for others in Hawaii as well. But that's our future, is building the business throughout the APAC region and continuing on that trajectory.
Awesome, thank you, Tate. So Deena, you mentioned in your presentation the importance of teamwork, and as a CEO, I'm sure managing a lot of people is not an easy task. With your history and all your lessons that you learned along the way, what do you think is or are key characteristics of a successful team?
I think understanding where you're going. So you need a leader that tells you where you're going and why. And everyone needs to understand their role, what they bring to the table. And when that happens, things work out quite well with the team. And I think there needs to be also a foundational awareness amongst everyone of peer accountability, but also we have this philosophy at our company, and I'm going to say it now, is that we will not allow our team members to fail, right? We will hold you accountable for your role on the project, but at the same time, we're not going to let anybody fail. And I think that creates great team.
Our next question is from Kale. He says, diversifying our economy is a common topic for us in Hawaii. The COVID pandemic had many of us asking how we can do this. As someone who works in the tech and software development industry, is there a promising future for this kind of work in Hawaii? Does this industry have potential for growth to create more jobs here? Is this an industry the state should explore?
Absolutely, 100%. Yes. I think absolutely. And I think the pandemic has created the opportunity and opened the door for more, right? Like work from home, everybody's realizing it. It definitely doesn't, I'm going to be the first person that comes out and says it, because everybody, is definitely saying, great, we can work from anywhere. It's the same thing and it's better. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. It's different. And so, but nevertheless, I think it's created the opportunity to allow Hawaii to diversify its talent pool. And I think that's amazing. And I think people are going to start coming and bringing fresh ideas. So we should be ready to embrace that.
Awesome, thank you, Kale. One more question from the chat. We have Kyung. Does being headquartered in Hawaii give your company advantages that being HQ'd elsewhere wouldn't otherwise?
It gives me an advantage in Hawaii. It doesn't necessarily give me an advantage outside of Hawaii. And so I'm very aware of that, right? If you're a company that's based in, let's say, California, do you really care? Is it advantageous that the company's based in Honolulu? If you're a company in Australia, they're like, okay, you're based in Hawaii. It's very advantageous for companies that are in Hawaii. They love knowing that there's somebody down the street that they can come knock on the door and be like, hey, where are you? Where's my stuff? So it's absolutely advantageous there, but I think recognizing the audience and depending on where we're targeting our services, we just, it's not quote advantageous from a marketing perspective. But that, I think that's fine. I think it's beneficial. So for our team to be diversified across the APAC region, and by being physically in Hawaii, I think that's advantageous. I'm not sure it's a competitive advantage per se right now.
Thank you, Kyung. So last question, Deena. We have a lot of aspiring entrepreneurs in the audience today, and a lot of students who will be entering the workforce after this semester. Do you have any lasting advice for our students here today who maybe perhaps want to pursue the route of being an entrepreneur or heading straight into the workforce? Do you have any advice for them?
I would say the last thing that I said, which is success, whether it's entrepreneurship or not, you have to have leadership. And if you can do those three things that I named, you are on your way. Be a problem solver. Again, like that was told to me in the corporate world, be a problem solver, win people over, and execute. If you do that, you're going to excel like across the board. And if you choose the entrepreneurial path, just be aware it's that times N. Just forever, right? It's that much harder, that much more leadership required. But if you do those things, you're going to be great no matter what.
And on that positive note, ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much, Deena, for being here today and sharing your journey with us. We really appreciate it. Once again, I'd like to thank First Insurance Company of Hawaii for making this speaker series possible. And Marcus from AMA, and especially AMA for co-hosting this event with us all. All of us here at PACE are sending everybody here our best wishes, and please stay safe and enjoy the weekend ahead. So mahalo. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Deena.
Entrepreneurs, I want to know what you think. Find me on social, tag me, reply to me, send me anything. I just want to know what you thought of today's podcast. My social handle is @DeenaWhite, @DeenaWhite.